List of Sliders characters. This is a list of Sliders characters, a science fiction television show that aired on the Fox network for 3 seasons and the Sci Fi Channel for 2 seasons. The show starred Jerry O'Connell as Quinn Mallory, a college student who builds a device that can transport himself and others to parallel worlds. Due to the nature of the show's similar yet always slightly different worlds conceit, several actors appear as different versions of the same character. The following is a list of actors who have appeared on Sliders. Main cast: Quinn Mallory. Quinn R. Mallory is a fictional character on the science fiction television show Sliders, played by Jerry O'Connell. Quinn was born in 1973 and raised in San Francisco, California, the son of Michael and Amanda Mallory. The driver's license shown in the episode Summer of Love indicates his birthday is January 24, but in the same episode Wade says that Quinn is a Libra, which would put his birthday between September 23 and October 22. Quinn was skipped ahead 2 grades in school at some point before 1984. He was bullied in junior high, and being skipped ahead 2 grades made him smaller and physically slower than his classmates. His father died in 1984. The week after his father's death, several students, including Rex Crandall, bullied Quinn at school, which ended in an incident where he hit Rex with a baseball bat. Quinn shattered Rex's kneecap, and Rex walked with a limp for the rest of his life. In the episode The Guardian, on a world where events occurred as they did on Earth Prime 12 years ago, Quinn prevented history from repeating itself. In Summer of Love, Quinn confesses to Archero that he was starting quarterback in high school, indicating that despite being slower than his classmates in junior high, near high he became an athlete in high school, probably driven by, in this case, healthy inferiority complex. In the episode Slide Like an Egyptian, Quinn meets his father in the afterlife while being used for life-after-death experiments. They discuss how they enjoyed playing American football together. Invention of sliding. Quinn attended the fictional California University during the early 1990s to earn his master's degree in physics, specializing in superstring theory. In 1994, he invented a device that allows people to travel from one parallel dimension to another. Quinn referred to this technology as sliding. On September 27, he went through the vortex with Wade Wells and Maximus Archero. Rembrandt Brown happened to be traveling in the area and was accidentally pulled into the vortex. The 4 of them landed on a parallel world where San Francisco was in an ice age. They holed up in Rembrandt's car until a deadly tornado headed their way. Because of the way the sliding technology functioned, the group's only choices were to reset the timer and potentially lose the possibility to go home, or to wait for the timer to hit 0 and go home then. Since the tornado was likely to kill them, Quinn had to reset the timer and lost the ability to return himself and the others home. For the next 5 years, Quinn and the others slid randomly to each world with a fixed amount of time on each one, hoping one of those trips would take them back to their own Earth. Distant Origin. In the 4th season premiere Genesis, Quinn learned that he was not originally from Earth Prime, but that he was actually from Cromeg Prime, an Earth where humans and Cromegs coexisted until a civil war broke out between the 2 species. He learned that he was transported to Earth Prime when he was a baby and left with his parents' doubles. When his parents came back to get him, his adoptive parents were too attached to him, so they hid Quinn, and Quinn was raised on Earth Prime. Quinn only learned this after he returned to Earth Prime after the Cromegs had invaded 2 months prior. He also learned that he had a brother, Colin, who was transported to another alternate Earth as well. The Unstuck Man. In the Season 5 premiere The Unstuck Man, Quinn and his brother Colin were unwillingly used in an experiment by Dr. Obron Jiger to merge people and parallel worlds. As a result of this experiment, Quinn was merged with a fraternal double of his who was referred to as Mallory, although his double's personality became dominant. After Mallory was sliding for a while, The Sliders met back with Dr. Jiger in the episode Eye of the Storm, and he attempted to unmerge Quinn from his double. Unfortunately, Dr. Jiger said that the two had been merged for too long and the only way to bring Quinn back would require killing Mallory. Rembrandt said that Quinn wouldn't want that, so Dr. Jiger ended the experiment and Quinn was presumed to be gone for good. But near the end of the series, Mallory would again show signs that Quinn still existed within him. Relationships Wade Wells, Quinn and Wade were close friends, working at the Doppler computer store. Wade had a crush on Quinn, something that he was too oblivious to notice for some time. Afterwards, both were too shy, and occupied by situations, they were thrown into act upon their feelings. It was never followed through due to a calamity befalling the Sliders. Maximus Archero, being Quinn's professor, it wasn't always easy for Archero to accept his student surpassing him. However, Archero often doubled as a surrogate father for Quinn. Quinn's relationship with Archero meant a lot to him, and Quinn was very hurt when Colonel Rickman murdered him. Rembrandt Brown. Initially, Rembrandt was at odds with Quinn, being the only one not to consent to sliding. The bitterness continued for a short duration, but dulled as Rembrandt gained respect for Quinn. The two became fairly close friends, though they still occasionally harbored conflicting views. Rembrandt gave Quinn the nickname Cue Ball. In Genesis, when given the choice to stay on Earth Prime to continue to fight the Cro-Mags or go sliding again, Rembrandt told Quinn, "You know I'm always with you, Cue Ball." Maggie Beckett. Quinn might have been attracted to Maggie. In The Breeder, Wade remarked to Quinn, "You have a thing for her, Maggie," which Quinn denied. In The Exodus Part 2, Dr. Stephen Jensen, Maggie's husband, at the time accused Quinn of having a romantic interest in Maggie, saying, "I see the way the two of you look at each other, and I don't like it." Quinn told Dr. Jensen that he felt Maggie is just someone he had to put up with, but Dr. Jensen did not believe him. In the other Slide of Paradise, Maggie and Quinn kissed when it appeared they wouldn't ever see each other again, and Maggie's fantasy and virtual slide showed that she held feelings for Quinn. In Roads Taken, Quinn and Maggie were married in a bubble universe that existed only for the two of them. Colin Mallory. When Quinn first found out he was from a parallel world, he was initially shocked. When he heard he had a long-lost brother, he was overjoyed. At meeting Colin in person, Quinn was impressed at how his brother was a genius on a world that had not developed beyond Amish standards and the angst of the Wild West. He initially took on the role of teacher to him as Colin needed an adjustment period so that he could embrace more modern technology. The two of them developed a scientific dynamic nearly similar to how Quinn and the professor interacted. The both of them were initially lost in the same vortex that merged Quinn with his fraternal double. Wade Wells. Wade Wells is a fictional character on the television show Sliders, played by Sabrina Lloyd. She was introduced in the pilot episode and was present until the last episode of the third season. Character history. Wade Wells was one of the first Sliders to travel after being invited to buy Quinn. At home, she was a computer store clerk at Doppler Computer Store working for her boss, Mr. Hurley. At the time, Wade had the biggest crush on Quinn, though he failed to notice. She was one of the more optimistic people in the group and enjoyed sliding as an adventure through her first year, though winning a deadly lottery that resulted in Quinn being shot in the back sobered her a bit to her situation. She brought to the team computer expertise not limited to hacking, and was a believer in the supernatural due to being friends with a witch aptly named Sabrina at home. She was extremely crushed when Archero was murdered, and her time dealing with it was further burdened by newcomer Maggie Beckett. It made her so distant that she once nearly joined a rock band whose leader was a vampire. Though Quinn, after rescuing her, let her know that she would always have the group, she stressed to him that she needed to hear it more often in some people. Wade's final slide with the main group would presumably return her home, but only with Rembrandt, as Quinn elected to stay behind with Maggie to help her fight Rickman. Cro-Mag abduction. 3 months after returning to Earth Prime, the Cro-Mags invaded and took her and Rembrandt prisoner. They were questioned by the Cro-Mags, sometimes together, sometimes not. Due to the Cro-Mags' superior mental powers, they never knew what was real after a while until she was threatened with being shipped to a Cro-Mag breeding camp, to which she was shipped to, an event that would haunt Rembrandt for a long time to come. Requiem Wade was eventually chosen by the Cro-Mag dynasty for a last-ditch experimental weapon to repatriate the Cro-Mag homeworld. Her body and mind became a living computer weapon to harness her mind power and the power of other living computers to bypass the Sly Cage, a device that prevented sliders from ever returning to the Cro-Mag homeworld. She presumably died while rescuing Rembrandt from the garrison that held her, though Rembrandt heard her final words that she would be there whenever he needed her. Relationship with other sliders. Wade had a strong crush on Quinn. Quinn was oblivious to this, though at certain times the pair of them would explore their feelings as they once made out in his basement on a world that was about to end. Sometime later it was revealed that she later regretted this, though the two of them would grow to care for one another. The possibility of the two of them being married was seen on another world where their doubles were successful business tycoons in an unsuccessful marriage, as Wade's double murdered her husband. Wade and the professor would often be in conflict, with the professor's firm stand on science explaining things logically, and Wade's belief in the supernatural. They would eventually grow a close friendship where they would know how to push one another's buttons, though would look out for one another. The professor would often refer to her as Miss Wells. She was devastated after he was murdered by Colonel Rickman. Rembrandt and her, in his words, were the only normal ones in the group, as Quinn and the professor were eggheads. She would confess to him first of her desire to one day have children, and Rembrandt told her that with her presence he gets a part of his wish to be back at home. He had also once explained to her about the fine line between faith and superstition. When the Cro-Mags augmented her into a living weapon, he was the one she had a psychic link to, and she prevented him from staying behind with her by returning him to the group. Maggie Beckett was initially hostile toward her, something she reciprocated after Maggie downplayed the professor's death and claimed she was weak. Wade did not appreciate her military philosophy of shooting first, nor her desire for revenge against Colonel Rickman for her husband's murder. For the longest time, Wade felt as if she was losing everything to her and not actually part of the group. They would later bond for a short time on a world where the dinosaurs still existed, but never had the chance to bond further, as she was soon separated from her and Quinn. Rembrandt Lee Brown is a fictional character played by Cleveland Derricks on the science fiction television show Sliders. In 1994, Rembrandt was living in San Francisco. Rembrandt is a musician whose stage name is the Crying Man because of his ability to cry real tears on stage. It is stated by Wade in Summer of Love that Rembrandt is a Gemini. However, a Slide Online feature of the Sci Fi Channel's Sliders website listed Rembrandt's birth date to be March 4, 1955. He served time in the U.S. Navy, and he is the only character to remain with the show for the whole series. He was the main character during the 5th season of Sliders. Rembrandt Brown had a promising singing career until he had a falling out with his singing group, the Spinning Tops. In the years that followed, Rembrandt took increasingly lower-paying jobs as his fame waned. However, he believed he could stage a comeback on September 27, 1994, when he was going to sing the national anthem at a San Francisco Giants baseball game. On his way to the stadium, Rembrandt was pulled into Quinn Mallory's sliding vortex along with his Cadillac. Rembrandt was the only of the original 4 sliders who didn't choose to slide and had no background in science. At the beginning, he strongly resented Quinn for accidentally pulling him into the vortex. However, Quinn and Rembrandt later became good friends. During one slide, Rembrandt discovered a world where his double achieved fame and fortune after breaking off for a solo career. With the world believing that their version had died in a mysterious accident, Rembrandt was able to step into his double's life and, albeit briefly, enjoy the fame and fortune he always wanted, eventually realizing that his inability to achieve stardom on his own earth was due to his own ego. and that his double had worked hard for these achievements, he decided to return with Quinn and the other sliders in the search for home. Wade and Rembrandt were able to slide to Earth Prime in 1997 or 1998. However, the Cromegs quickly took over that world and captured them. The Cromegs threatened to send Wade to a breeder camp on another world if she didn't tell them how to find Quinn, whose independent development of sliding would allow them. Rembrandt couldn't tell them what he didn't know, so Wade was sent to the breeder camp. A month after Wade was taken, Quinn and fellow slider Maggie Beckett freed Rembrandt from the Cromeg prison. After this experience, he had strong guilty feelings towards what happened to Wade, as well as anger toward the Cromegs. Rembrandt is the only character who stayed in the show from the first to the last episode. He had to see the death of Maximus Archero, as well as deal with the fates of Wade Wells and Quinn and Colin Mallory. In the final episode, The Seer, Rembrandt found a biological weapon there that he intended to use against the Cromeg invaders on Earth Prime. At the same time, a psychic who already knew a lot about the sliders, suggesting that the psychic's powers might be real, predicted that the next time the sliders would slide, they would die. Rembrandt decided to slide alone for this slide because the Cromeg sliding equipment being used was heavily damaged and would only accommodate one person. The others believed they might have altered the future predicted by the psychic by having only Rembrandt slide instead of all four of them. The seer died before he could answer them. Music career. Rembrandt Brown has a career as a musician. He is called the Crying Man because he cries real tears on stage. Some of his songs include Cry Like a Man, Tears in My Fro, My Fro, Love Explosion, Headbutt Me, Weeping Wall of Tears, Explosion of Love, Who Stole My Woman, I'd Pawn My Gold Crown for You, hit in an alternate universe, Wave of Tears, hit in The King Is Back, I'm a Tear Jerk. Rembrandt used to sing with a group called the Spinning Tops, parody of the Four Tops and the Spinners with 3 other members. His last performance with the Spinning Tops was in December 1986, reference into the Mystic. Maximilian Archero. Professor Maximilian P. Archero, often called the Professor, or simply Professor, or occasionally Max, during the 3rd season, is a fictional character on the science fiction television show Sliders. He was played by John Rhys Davies. Maximilian P. Archero was born in Great Britain during the early 1940s. His driving license, shown in Summer of Love, indicates that his birth date is September 23. When he was a young child, his aunt's house was bombed by the Luftwaffe while he and his mother were staying there. Both Archero's mother and aunt were killed. His only memories of this incident were his mother's dead body being pulled off him. Since his father was fighting in India at the time, there was no way for Archero to be identified, so he was put in an orphanage. After the war ended, Archero's father came to get him season's greetings. Archero served in the British Army as a young adult. After completing his service, he moved to the United States, where he pursued graduate studies in physics and met fellow student Christina Fox, whom he later married. Christina died of a brain aneurysm when she was 27 years. Archero had a son, however. It is not revealed in the show whether or not Christina Fox was the mother into the Mystic. At the beginning of the pilot, Archero was Regents Professor of Cosmology and Ontology at the fictional California University. As a traveling companion, Archero was arrogant, hot-tempered, and pompous, often referring to people who failed to meet his expectations as blistering idiots. But he was not without a soft spot, particularly toward individuals he perceived as kindred intellects. Having been estranged from his son before he began sliding, Archero had expressed that he wished Quinn were his son. Archero was somewhat resentful of Quinn, jealous of Quinn's greater intelligence, as well as the fact that Quinn and not Archero invented sliding. In 1996, when the sliders mistakenly believed they had landed home, Archero's double attempted to impersonate him. Quinn, Wade, and Rembrandt never knew whether they took the right Archero sliding with them or not post-traumatic slide syndrome. Later that year, Archero was diagnosed with a terminal illness and attempted to stop sliding. He continued to slide because Quinn needed him, and Quinn was more fearful of his friend and mentor's death than Archero himself was the guardian. In mid-1997, while on an alternate Earth that was to be destroyed by a pulsar, Archero was shot by ruthless Marine Colonel Angus Rickman. Rickman initially tried to shoot Quinn, but Archero took the bullet for him. His last words to Quinn were, "Get them, Rembrandt, and wade home." Since the sliders never determined which Archero they took in post-traumatic slide syndrome, it is possible the original Archero from Earth Prime is still alive. As Rembrandt said at the end of the episode, "We've got an Archero, and we don't even know which one." Beliefs in the episode Into the Mystic, Archero expresses strong opposition to the ideas that any supernatural phenomena such as psychics around the sliders were real. He believed that all that is perceived as supernatural is an illusion designed to fool the simple-minded. However, in the episode Obsession, Archero found it interesting that a psychic saved the life of the world's Abraham Lincoln. Wrong, Archero. In the second season episode Post-Traumatic Slide Syndrome, the vortex had opened on Quinn's front lawn as the Archeros had a showdown. Quinn wanted to take them both and sort it out after we slide, but one of the Archeros said, "Like hell we will," and attacked his counterpart. After a brief scuffle, one of the Archeros slugged the other one and jumped into the vortex alongside Quinn. Once the vortex closed, the remaining Archero said, "Oh my God," with a worried look on his face. When it was left as a possibility that a double of Archeros had slid instead of the Earth Prime Archero, controversy has been generated among fans about which Archero actually slid. In an interview done in 2009, the show's creator, Tracy Torm, stated that he intended that the Archero who slid should not be the original Archero. But due to Torm losing control of the show and John Rhys Davies leaving the following year, this issue was never resolved. Casting in the DVD audio commentary on the Sliders pilot episode, series creators Tracy Torm and Robert K. Weiss revealed that the character of Maximilian Archero was very nearly played by actors other than John Rhys Davies. Hector Elizondo was in fact the producer's final choice for the role prior to auditioning Rhys Davies, but ultimately passed due. At one point, Elizondo went on a late-night talk show and mentioned that, "I would be doing Sliders right now, except for one word, Vancouver." Also on the DVD commentary, Weiss and Torm reveal that other actors who were considered for the role included Ricardo Montalban and David Ogden Stiers, who was reportedly one of the chief finalists. Maggie Beckett. Maggie A. Beckett is a fictional character on the television show Sliders, played by Kari Wura. She was introduced in the episode The Exodus, Part 1, and was present in the last 9 episodes of the 3rd season and the entire 4th and 5th seasons. Maggie had a father named Thomas Beckett, who was also in the military. Character history: when the Sliders first met Maggie in the episode The Exodus, she was a captain in the United States Marines under the command of Colonel Angus Rickman. She was married to Dr. Stephen Jensen, who was in a wheelchair due to an accident a year prior. She was part of a plot to assassinate Dr. Jaribek, a scientist who discovered that a pulsar would soon irradiate the Earth, killing all life. Since the Sliders were with him when he died, Maggie questioned them about anything he might have said. The Sliders managed to escape from Maggie and locked her in the trunk of a car, but Maggie arrested the Sliders when she met them again at Dr. Jaribek's office at California Institute of Technology. When Maggie's superiors learned about sliding technology, Quinn was ordered to help Dr. Jensen, Maggie's husband, perfect his sliding technology. Maggie and Quinn were ordered to scout parallel worlds to find one that was suitable to build a colony where people would be free from the deadly pulsars. Maggie almost died when she arrived to Earth Prime and was unable to breathe the air. Quinn concluded that the people on Maggie's Earth must have different lungs from the lungs of people on Earth Prime. Dr. Jensen felt that Quinn and Maggie were attracted to each other and was angry at Quinn because of that. Rickman killed Dr. Jensen to keep him quiet. When Maggie found out that Rickman murdered her husband, she wanted revenge. Rickman slid, so Maggie's only way to get revenge was to slide with Quinn, Rembrandt, and Wade. Right after Maggie decided to slide with the others, when Quinn said, "Welcome aboard, Captain Beckett," Maggie revealed that she resigned her position in the military and was now just Beckett. In the episode Roads Taken, Quinn and Maggie went into a bubble universe that existed only for the two of them. In that universe, the two were married and had a child named Thomas, named after Maggie's father. Relationship with Wade. Maggie and Wade never got along. When they first met, Wade said, "There's something about that girl I don't like." "No, make that everything about that girl I don't like." Maggie was critical of the way Wade was handling the death of Maximus Archero and used it as evidence that she was weak. However, she started to understand, as she also broke down due to her husband's death and reevaluated her opinion of Wade somewhat when Wade saved her life from a zombie, commenting that Wade showed her something by doing that and seemed somewhat hum. In the episode Dinner Slide, the conflict between Wade and Maggie was further examined. At the beginning of the episode, Wade was upset about Maggie's desire to kill Rickman out of revenge. Later, when the Sliders encountered dinosaurs, Maggie wanted to kill the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Wade remarked, "Isn't there anything she doesn't think about killing?" By the end of the episode, there were indicators that the two were starting to get along. Wade and Maggie said "nice shooting" to each other as they were shooting a gun at an oxygen tank in the dinosaur's mouth in an attempt to kill the dinosaur. The last time they saw each other was in the episode This Slide of Paradise. At the end of the episode, Maggie said, "I'm going to miss you getting on my nerves, Wade," and then Wade responded by saying "same here." When Maggie met Marta in the episode Genesis, Marta said, "Wade said you were a tough bitch," and Maggie responded, "Yeah, I bet she did." After the Sliders lost Wade and apparently Rembrandt for good, Maggie broke down and said she couldn't take the loss anymore until, as part of Wade's last act, she returned Rembrandt to the Sliders. Personal information: in the episode This Slide of Paradise, it was revealed that Maggie had an affair with Angus Rickman. She said it was the biggest mistake of her life. Maggie and her father had a strained relationship, raising her like a soldier. Maggie referred to him as the General. She also had an uncle who was an organ donor. Colin Mallory. Colin Mallory is a fictional character on the American science fiction television series Sliders, played by Charlie O'Connell. He was introduced in the 6th episode of the 4th season, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Oh, thou. Oh, thou. Oh, thou. Oh, thou. Oh, thou." Quinn Mallory had only learned Colin was his brother 5 episodes earlier in Genesis. When the Sliders found Colin, he was flying a hang glider that he invented and had gotten stuck in a tree. The local residents were angry at Colin for doing this because they were afraid his inventions might have negative consequences. One of the residents wanted to shoot Colin to get it over with, until the sheriff told the angry residents to go home. When the sheriff said, "One of these days you're going to go a bit too far," Colin Mallory, the Sliders, knew that this was Quinn's brother. The universe Colin was raised on had far less technology than Earth Prime. Colin invented the first machine on this Earth that generates electricity. This was one of his many inventions. The local residents believed that Colin was doing the devil's work with his inventions. Colin believed that electricity is both safe and useful, and wished he could convince the local residents the same thing. Colin was in love with someone named Susan on his Earth. However, her mother disapproved Colin because of her fear of Colin's inventions. Susan was engaged to another person. Colin's adoptive parents' duplicates on the world Colin was raised of. Colin's actual parents died when Colin was very young. Since this Earth had little technology, there was not the medical technology necessary to cure Colin's parents of their illness. Since the Sliders had a small amount of time on this world, they had to hurry to find the microdot that would inform Colin of his origins. They found it just in time, and Colin was informed that he was originally from Cramag Prime and that he was placed on an alternate Earth. Quinn and Colin's birth parents presumably did look for Colin when the war with the Cramags was over, but Colin's adoptive parents were dead, so his birth parents were unable to find him. After Colin saw the microdot, Colin was resistant to sliding with Quinn and the others, since Colin didn't want to leave his world and the woman he wanted to marry. Quinn did convince Colin that his future was sliding with him, so Colin went into the vortex. Since Colin was raised on an Earth with less technology than most Earths the sliders visit, he was unfamiliar with the technology he encountered. On his first slide, Colin landed in the path of a moving vehicle. Being unaware that it would be lethal to be hit by the vehicle, Colin did not get out of the way as the vehicle approached him. Quinn had to move Colin out of the way. In the episode Revelations, Colin met who he thought were his birth parents, but it turned out they were doubles. In the episode The Unstuck Man, Colin was made unstuck in the multiverse, meaning that he was not anchored on a particular world. This was the result of an experiment by Dr. Obron Jiger, who later said that he was beyond his reach, possibly on another parallel world, or was destroyed in the initial encounter. According to Mark Scott Zicree, a writer for the show, the retcon from Genesis was originally intended to be a red herring. The idea was that Colin was actually a clone of Quinn created by the Cramags as a sleeper agent within the Sliders. In the original draft for Revelations, he would flip attacking Quinn and ending the season on a cliffhanger. This would probably have had the effect of simplifying the somewhat complicated and largely financially unresolvable plot progression of the show. Nevertheless, because this would render Charlie O'Connell's character unusable in a regular capacity after season 4, and because by that time Jerry O'Connell's residency on the show depended on his brother's presence, and because this was all before anyone knew the brothers would be departing, David Peckinpah vetoed the idea. The veto of Zicree's idea was finalized with Lipschitz Live, in which Colin has a double, which would mean he couldn't be a clone of Quinn unless the double is also a clone. Curiously, Charlie O'Connell also appeared in the season 3 episode Dragonslide as Officer O'Hara and also as Kit Richards in the episode As Time Goes By. Although no relationship was mentioned at the time, it is assumable that O'Hara and Richards may be doubles of Colin under different names, retroactively solidifying Colin into the series prior to his actual season 4 introduction. Mallory. This version of Quinn Mallory is the fraternal double of the first Quinn. Unlike the first slider of his namesake, this version of him grew up in a life of petty crime before losing the ability to walk. Stuck in a wheelchair for about a year, he was found by Dr. Obron Jiger, who used him as a test subject to combine subtle fragments of doubles across the multiverse. With this, Dr. Jiger was able to restore his ability to walk. Later on one certain day, Jiger decided to use him in an experiment that merged him with a fraternal double, the original Quinn Mallory. This experiment resulted in a combined version with a mixed-up mind, one trying to surface over the other. After helping the sliders who were left after the experiment to stop Jiger from combining the multiverse, he decided to join them along with scientist Diana Davis. Mallory's time with the sliders was strained for the start of the time he was with them. Maggie was bluntly more interested in getting Quinn back at the cost of Mallory's mind, and getting into the already hectic and dangerous life of a slider was something he had to adjust to. Soon, though, the mind of original Quinn started to fade over time, and he was convinced that Quinn was gone for good. Mallory was known for some womanizing, a history with video games, petty theft, and mixing in with the wrong crowds, though he learned from these experiences. After Jiger returned a last time, they discovered that he and Quinn were merged for too long, and in order for Quinn to return, Mallory would not survive the process. Rembrandt, knowing what Quinn would have wanted, elected to stop the experiment, and they remained merged, though there were subtle clues that Quinn was still alive in him. Mallory was present when Rembrandt vortexed out from the Seer's world, unable to volunteer himself in his place. Diana Davis. Diana Davis led a sheltered and doted life. She was chosen for Dr. Jiger project concerning his combined device. When the Quinns were merged, she was there to explain to Rembrandt and Maggie what had happened to Quinn and Colin. She soon discovered what Dr. Jiger was really up to and helped Mallory and the Sliders stop his project before joining the Sliders in the attempt to split the two Quinns. Diana had a lot to adjust to when she began traveling with Rembrandt and Maggie. She had trouble working with a team, finding herself undefined by her ex-mentor, and the realization that sliding would mean her life would often be in danger, a realization she came to after being introduced to the Cromegs in a literal war zone. After the disappearance of Quinn and Colin, Diana was the one who would take over as the scientific expert. She often carried around a portable computing device that helped her to calculate and detect temporal disturbances, a skill that would prove essential in the maintenance of the timer, reviving Wade's conscious mind and getting off an asteroid suspended in hyperspace. Maggie claimed that since she had a woman to relate to, the scientific stuff was easier to understand. Diana went through some changes herself that got her to get over certain fears. She got over her fear of the darkness after her brain died a few times when she was abducted to be a holographic NPC, and having her brain temporarily evolved after a lobotomy went wrong. After the final attempt to split the Quinns failed, she elected to stay with the Sliders after Jiger showed them the way home. This would not happen, though, as she was present when Rembrandt made the dangerous attempt home. She remained stranded on the Sears world along with Maggie Beckett and Mallory. Recurring and notable characters. A number of characters recurred on Sliders, the science fiction show. The show involved a concept of doubles, alternate versions of a person on alternate Earths. Thus, a number of recurring characters on Sliders were doubles of each other. There were some recurring characters, however, who were other Sliders. Amanda Mallory. Michael Mallory. Michael Mallory is the father of Quinn Mallory, who was killed in 1984 when Quinn was 11. Mr. Mallory was hit by a car on his way to work. Michael Mallory was played by Tom Butler in the pilot, and Julian of the Spirits, Jim Turner in Slide Like an Egyptian, John Walcott in Genesis, O Brother, Where Art Thou?, Slide Cage, My Brother's Keeper, and Revelations. An alternate version of Michael Mallory was seen in the second part of the pilot at the end of the episode. Originally, Quinn and the others thought they were home, but when Quinn saw his father, he realized he was not home, as Quinn's father had been dead for 10 years. When Quinn's father saw Quinn's reaction, he said, another version of Michael Mallory was seen in the episode Julian of the Spirits. This was on an alternate Earth, where the population was afraid of technology, and technology that was more advanced than the advancements made by the 1940s was illegal. The Michael Mallory on this Earth was an advocate of technology and spent 5 years in jail for possessing technology, and was released on the condition that he become an anti-technology informant. He was working with a group called Bayside Power that was secretly developing technology in the hopes that technology would be legalized. If technology becomes legal, Bayside Power intends to sell the technology they developed and have an advantage in the market because they would be the only ones with this technology. The Quinn Mallory of this Earth died of polio. Archero, Wade, and Rembrandt came to this Michael Mallory because the timer was broken, Quinn was missing, and they needed technology to fix the timer. Michael Mallory pretended to want to help the Sliders, but in fact he only wanted to steal the timer to give its technology to Bayside Power, and then was going to kill the Sliders. When the Sliders found out about Michael Mallory's intentions, they broke into his house to take the technology necessary to fix the timer. They fixed it with 17 seconds left, but right then Michael Mallory came down with a gun and told the Sliders that they were not going anywhere. When they opened the vortex, Quinn, who was stuck in the astral plane, became visible by the vortex. Michael Mallory demanded the Sliders turn the vortex off and announced, "My son is dead." Quinn responded saying, "I'm not the Quinn you knew, but I am your son." Quinn also said that he didn't believe that his father would hurt innocent people, and then Michael Mallory put down his gun. Quinn was reunited with his father from Earth Prime in the episode Slide Like an Egyptian. The people of this world were conducting an experiment to kill people and bring them back to life to learn about the experiences in the afterlife. Quinn was dead for 5 minutes and was the first person brought back to life. He saw his father in the afterlife. They threw the football to each other, and Quinn explained to him that he could not find his way home. Quinn's father told him, "If you can touch it, you can catch it." In Genesis, Quinn learned from Amanda Mallory that the people he thought were his parents were in fact alternates of his birth parents, so thus learned that the Michael Mallory from Earth Prime was not his biological father, and that his biological father was still alive on Cromag Prime. Quinn learned that the Michael Mallory from Cromag Prime built a weapon to defeat the Cromags. Quinn met an alternate version of Michael Mallory in My Brother's Keeper. This Michael Mallory is a doctor who developed a technique to clone humans. He cloned people with the money to afford it, kept the clones in a repository, and transplanted an organ from the clone if needed. Michael Mallory mistook Quinn for his own son's clone. A group of people opposed to cloning abducted Michael Mallory. One of the anti-clone advocates wanted to kill him, but Quinn wanted to use him as a bargaining chip to free his friends. After a talk between Quinn and this Michael Mallory was convinced to quit his job that involved cloning humans, and after this, he opened up a clinic for people who sold their organs to the wealthy. Quinn and Colin met a version of Michael Mallory in Revelations, which he thought was his and Colin's birth father, and they thought they were on Cromag Prime. As it turns out, they were on an Earth that was similar to Cromag Prime, but not Cromag Prime some fans call Cromag Double Prime. In the 1970s, the Michael Mallory on this Earth, along with his wife Elizabeth Mallory, created a disease to destroy the Cromags on that Earth. Isaac Clarke, who was sentenced to exile from Cromag Prime, returned in the late 1990s with the help of the Sliders and came to submit evidence against this Earth's Michael and Elizabeth Mallory to put them on trial for their crimes against the Cromags. Elizabeth Mallory, played by Marnie MacPhail, is the mother of Quinn and Colin Mallory and is from Cromag Prime. She is seen in the episodes Genesis, O Brother, Where Art Thou, and Revelations, though the version of her in Revelations is a double. It is never explained why Quinn and Colin's mother is not a version of Amanda Mallory, even though Amanda Mallory did say in Genesis that Quinn's birth parents are the doubles of her and Michael Mallory, although this could be a case in which doubles do not look similar, like Mallory and Quinn. Conrad Benish Jr. Conrad Benish, Jr., played by Jason Gaffney of Earth Prime, is a student in the same class, which Quinn Mallory is a student, and Maximilian Archero is a professor. Archero finds him brilliant but obnoxious. Quinn and Benish are friends. Benish has an interest in drugs and bombs. When the FBI showed up to question him about the disappearance of the Sliders, he said, "If this is about the bomb I just bought, I thought it was a plant holder, honest." He dresses in a stereotypically hippie fashion, wearing long hair and sunglasses. An alternate Conrad Benish from Summer of Love has short hair and identifies as a young Republican in favor of the war that was taking place at the time on that alternate Earth. A version of Benish is seen in Last Days, where it seems his genius may be unchecked and a danger to his particular Earth. He is also trying to create the failed atomic bomb, which that Earth's Albert Einstein purposely sabotaged. With Professor Archero's help, he builds one and successfully launches it against the asteroid set on a collision course with the Earth. After the bomb is built, Archero, knowing that Benish will now have unchecked power after he slides to a different world, takes a crucial part of the bomb plans and keeps it. But, unbeknownst to him until just before he slides, he drops it and Benish finds it. The character only appeared once in the second season, and for the last time in the episode Invasion, though he is never named or credited as Benish. Here, He is a prisoner of the Cro-Mags, eyeless as a result. Michael Hurley. On Earth Prime, Michael Hurley, played by Gary Jones, works at Doppler Computer Store and was the boss of Quinn and Wade until they went sliding September 27, 1994. On that day, Quinn's double arrived on Earth Prime and made some remarks to Mr. Hurley that got Quinn fired. An alternate version of Mr. Hurley is in the second part of the pilot. On an alternate Earth where, in 1994, the United States is a territory of the Soviet Union, Mr. Hurley is part of an underground American revolutionary group and is under the command of this world's Wade Wells. In the episode Prince of Wales, on a world where the United States lost the Revolutionary War, and in 1995 is the British States of America, Mr. Hurley works for this world's version of Maximus Archero, and was part of a plot to assassinate Prince Harold, heir to the British throne on that particular Earth. However, he is shocked by the revelation of the truth and switches sides once it is revealed, releasing Quinn and driving him to meet up with the others. Another version of Mr. Hurley is in the episode Time Again and World, who also worked at the Doppler Computer Store. He's one of the first to see the full Constitution for the first time in over 30 years. Pavel Curlienko. Every version of Pavel Curlienko, played by Alex Bruhansky, that the Sliders have met has been a taxi driver. Two different versions of him are seen in the second part of the pilot. The first version was from the Soviet-ruled America and was encountered by Rembrandt Brown. Pavel turned Rembrandt into the authorities on this world for handing him a dollar bill, which was the trademark of the underground American revolutionary on this alternate Earth. Another version of Pavel was seen at the end of the episode on an Earth that was very much like Earth Prime, but where Michael Mallory was still alive. Rembrandt feared him because Pavel was the one who turned him into the authorities on the previous Earth. Rembrandt nearly left the taxi when Pavel said he recognized Rembrandt, but stayed when Pavel said he recognized that Rembrandt was the crying man. Other versions of Pavel are also seen in Fever and Into the Mystic. When Rembrandt met the version of Pavel in Fever, Rembrandt asked Pavel if he liked driving taxis. Pavel responded by saying it was his destiny. Rembrandt said, "You don't know the half of it." Ross J. Kelly. Ross J. Kelly, played by John Novak, is an ambulance-chasing lawyer on most of the Earths where the Sliders encountered him during seasons 1 and 2. On Earth Prime, Kelly was widely known for his pandering television advertisements, in which large accident settlements were promised to victims willing to hire the shyster attorney to sue for compensation. On their behalf, Kelly's popular catch line in the ads is, "I'll fight for you." However, Kelly himself became a collaborator with the occupying Russian government. A different version of Kelly, though still very similar to his Earth Prime incarnation, was encountered in the episode Into the Mystic on the Mysticism Earth. Kelly's advice was not to do so. Thomas Calhoun. Thomas Calhoun, played by Will Sasso, works at the Dominion Hotel, where the Sliders stayed in seasons 1 and 2. Alternate versions of him were seen in Fever, The King is Back, Julian of the Spirits, Great Fellas, and Time Again and World. On the world where Rembrandt Brown was a superstar, Calhoun informed the public that Rembrandt was staying at the hotel. This greatly annoyed Archero. In the episode Great Fellas, he once again revealed that Rembrandt was staying at the hotel, but this time for different reasons. In seasons 4 and 5, the Sliders encountered alternate versions of Gomez Calhoun, played by a different actor, Israel Juarb, working at the Chandler Hotel. He was seen in Lipschitz Live, Roads Taken, and To Catch a Slider. Lston Diggs. Lston Diggs, played by Lester Barry, is a waiter at the Royal Chancellor Hotel, at which the Sliders stayed during season 3. Diggs was often the person the Sliders got information from. He was seen in the episodes Double Cross, Desert Storm, Murder Most Foul, and The Breeder. Lston Diggs was first seen in the episode Double Cross, where he recognized Rembrandt Brown, the crying man. On this world, San Francisco was just another neighborhood of a large city of San Angeles, which spanned from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Upon arriving on the next world, Rembrandt ran into Elston Diggs right after sliding and asked him if they were still in San Angeles. Diggs said they were in Los Angeles. After this, Quinn realized that Logan St Clair must have switched parts of the timer, so that they now had a 400-mile radius to slide within, instead of a 2-mile radius. Angus Rickman. Angus Rickman, played by Roger Daltrey, is a Marine colonel on an alternate Earth that was to be destroyed by a pulsar. The character was introduced in the episode The Exodus. He had a fungus infection in his brain which required him to extract brain tissue from the brains of compatible donors and inject the tissue into his brain, which causes him to temporarily morph into that person. Extracting brain tissue from these people caused them to go into a coma 3 days before the pulsar was going to destroy his Earth. Rickman specifically had Wade Wells select 150 people that had brain tissue compatible with Rickman's to slide to the new world. Originally, the sliders were going to slide with Rickman and the 150 people, but Rickman ordered the slide early and murdered Archero when the sliders attempted to slide with him. Rickman also murdered Dr. Stephen Jensen, the husband of Maggie Beckett, when Jensen learned that Rickman was responsible for the coma victims. Rickman lied to Maggie and said a mob had killed him. Quinn, Wade, and Rembrandt slid to the Earth. Rickman, Maggie, and the other 150 people slid thanks to getting deep enough underground and the new ability to track wormholes given to them by Jensen, and informed Maggie there that Rickman murdered her husband. Initially, Quinn and Maggie wanted revenge on Rickman for murdering Professor Archero and Dr. Jensen. However, Rickman still had the timer used to send him, Maggie, and the other people to this Earth. So Rickman used the timer to slide and escape from Quinn and Maggie. The timer Rickman was using also had the coordinates to Earth Prime, which gave Quinn, Wade, and Rembrandt greater incentive to catch Rickman. The sliders began chasing Rickman to parallel Earths so that Quinn, Rembrandt, and Wade can find their home coordinates and so that Maggie could get revenge. Although initially both Quinn and Maggie wanted revenge, Quinn later decided against revenge and only wanted his home coordinates. The first time the sliders encountered Rickman since the Exodus was in the episode The Other Slide of Darkness. By this time, Rickman's face had changed from injecting the brain tissue of non-compatible donors, and he was now played by another actor, Neil Dixon. In this episode, Rickman's timer broke, leaving him unable to slide. Rickman encountered Quinn's double, the first double of his that Quinn met, and Quinn's double was going to kill Rickman. Then Rickman told Quinn's double about Quinn and the others. Quinn's double then decided to give Rickman a deal. Quinn's double would not kill Rickman and would fix his timer, and in exchange Rickman would bring Quinn to his double. Rickman did this, so Quinn's double fixed his timer, and Rickman slid. After this, Rickman's timer was counting down like the slider's timer, indicating that Quinn's double fixed it in the same way Quinn did the original timer. The next time the sliders encountered Rickman was in the episode Dinner Slide. He returned to the world the survivors of his world slid to in order to harvest their brain tissue, but had to contend with dinosaurs and the sliders and was forced to slide when his timer ran out, but returned later. He was defeated again, but escaped once more. The last episode with Rickman is this Slide of Paradise. On this Earth, the sliders managed to take Rickman's timer away from him, leaving him stranded on this Earth. Just as Quinn, Wade, and Rembrandt are about to use Rickman's timer to slide home and let Maggie use the other timer to continue sliding, Rickman shows up. Quinn pushed Wade and Rembrandt through and stays behind to help Maggie fight Rickman. During the fight, Rickman attempts to slide through the vortex to Earth Prime, but the vortex closed just as he jumped towards it, and he falls off the cliff and dies. Obron Jiger. Obron Jiger is a scientist played by Peter Jurasik. He merged Quinn with one of his alternates and caused Colin Mallory to be unstuck in space-time. He was seen in the episodes The Unstuck Man, Applied Physics, and Eye of the Storm. Dr. Jiger himself is unstuck in space-time, which means that he is not anchored on one parallel world and constantly slides randomly to alternate parallel worlds. Dr. Jiger has to use special equipment to stay on his Earth, and even then he is only able to stay in a small part of his lab. He is first seen in the episode The Unstuck Man, conducting a science experiment that involved counting down to the same point in time as to when the slider's timer would hit 0. When the sliders, which at the time were Rembrandt, Maggie, Colin, and Quinn, arrived on the new world, the people that slid out were Rembrandt, Maggie, and Mallory, who is Quinn's fraternal alternate that Maggie and Rembrandt just met. Quinn and Colin did not slide out of the vortex. Mallory had memories of the Quinn Mallory that Maggie and Rembrandt knew. When Mallory called Dr. Jiger about this, he asked Mallory if he was now two people. At one point, Dr. Jiger agreed to extend the time Rembrandt and Maggie had to stay on the current world to give them more time to attempt to retrieve Colin and Quinn. However, this was a trap to get Rembrandt and Maggie into suspended animation. It was Dr. Jiger who merged Quinn Mallory with his fraternal alternate, Mallory. It was also Dr. Jiger who caused Colin to be unstuck in space-time. Dr. Jiger was about to conduct another experiment to merge alternate Earths together, just like he had merged Quinn and Mallory. Dr. Jiger believed that this would create a better world. Dr. Diana Davis, who worked with Dr. Jiger and had been very supportive of him up until then, said that Dr. Jiger was forcing this on unsuspecting people who might not want this. Dr. Jiger responded saying he wasn't in the mood for an ethics debate. Mallory said that Dr. Jiger would kill millions with his experiment and that he had to be stopped. Dr. Davis ended Dr. Jiger's experiment and caused him to be no longer anchored in the small part of his lab. Thus, Dr. Jiger was now unstuck again, sliding randomly between alternate worlds. Dr. Jiger was seen again in Applied Physics, where Dr. Jiger convinced Diana Davis that he had good intentions when he did not, and caused Diana to do something that would alter the complete history of this alternate Earth, including dramatically alter the life of her double on this Earth. His attempts to get loose on that Earth were ended when Diana's double cut power to the reactor powering the field anchoring him, making him unstuck again. In Eye of the Storm, Jiger has managed to create his own world made out of bits taken from other parallel worlds, and has drawn people there to merge with them in an attempt to permanently anchor himself. The Sliders arrive in this world and find Jiger, who offers to separate Quinn and Mallory, but says can't do anything for Colin, but really tries to merge himself with Mallory, but is found out and stopped. Afterward, Jiger tries for real to separate the two, but is unable to without killing Mallory, as the two have been combined too long, so the Sliders decide not to go through with it. A mob storms Jiger's room and he's shot, but before he dies he tells Diana how to send the people home and gives her a small disc, but dies before telling her what it contains. On the next world, Diana looks at it and is shocked by what Jiger has given them, the coordinates of Earth Prime and Diana and Mallory's home world. Logan St. Clair. Logan St. Clair, played by Zoe McClellan, appears in the first episode of Season 3 Double Cross as one of the chief employees of Prototronics, an unscrupulous wormhole research corporation the Sliders become involved with. She is later discovered to be a gender-flipped fraternal double of Quinn Mallory. Her mother remarried, and she took on her stepfather's name, intending to use the Sliders to perfect her technology and use it to raid parallel worlds to steal their resources, as the world she lived on was losing them because of the vast technological development. She is discovered and is also revealed to have murdered her Earth's version of Professor Archero, who invented sliding on her world. The group make an attempt to escape but found she had the ability to track wormholes. She would then threaten Wade before Quinn programmed her timer to enter into a wormhole with a random destination. She was intended to be a recurring antagonist for the season, but was never reused. Angus Rickman instead claims the distinction of being the series' first continuing villain. However, because of the encounter with her, The original timer, which was once bound to the San Francisco area, now had a larger radius of anywhere between there and Los Angeles. On Lipschitz World, Quinn would mention that he met her in order to get onto Lipschitz Live, but could never give a straight answer when asked if he had sex with her. The Cro-Mag dynasty. A race of sliding marauders dedicated to the conquest of all Earths and the systematic genocide of the human race. When first encountered by the original group, they had ape-like faces, top-knot hair, and were armed with handheld laser weapons. Reportedly, they are a race of Cro-Magnon from prehistoric times that on Earth Prime were wiped out in place of humanity. On their world, humanity was either wiped out or in a constant war with them. They have airships called Manta that are made with living metal and slide capable, in addition to holding prisoners in place with a gravitational device. The history of the Cro-Mag dynasty has varied in every season. In Season 2, they allegedly wiped out or subjugated humanity on their Earth, which had large trees bigger than sequoias. Telepathic human slaves were kept in cages and called upon for interrogation of prisoners. The Cro-Mag's own mental abilities were superior to humans, as the professor once thought he was speaking to Rembrandt before the real Rembrandt walked into his holding cell. In Season 3, it was also told that the double of Quinn Mallory, who provided Quinn with the equation for sliding, gave it also to the Cro-Mags, resulting in the destruction of his own Earth family and friends, leaving him in a self-imposed exile on a parallel Earth that treated him like a god. In Season 4, the Cro-Mags' image changed to resemble more of a Gestapo military force. Their origin had changed again, in that on their homeworld they were driven from their world by the collective efforts of scientists working under Michael Mallory, who developed a weapon that only worked against the Cro-Mags. This weapon was the goal in Season 4, to get them off of Earth Prime, which was overrun with the Cro-Mags. The weapon in question had also made Cro-Mag procreation difficult, since now the Cro-Mag female died days after giving birth. This necessitated the need to crossbreed with human women who were taken away to breeding camps, one of which Wade Wells was abducted away to. The Cro-Mag children were also taken away to deadly training grounds to hunt down captured humans for a chance to enter the elite squads. Entry into Cro-Mag Prime was also near impossible thanks to a slide cage that blocked all attempted trans-dimensional travelers from entering. In Season 5, it was discovered that the weapon, later called a Vorton device that was supposed to only affect Cro-Mags, destroyed the ecosystem on Cro-Mag Prime, leaving its use impractical. However, other parallel worlds were beginning to develop germ cultures that only affected Cro-Mags, leaving Cro-Mags unable to continue a conquest of their worlds. By the end of the series, it was left unknown how the Cro-Mag invasion of Earth Prime had concluded. Colitor, played by Rhiannon Scone, was a particular Cro-Mag the Sliders ran into twice on their travels. He was first encountered at the slide cage, a device that trapped interdimensional travelers who were trying to gain entrance into Cro-Mag Prime. He led a faction of Cro-Mags who were trapped there in a constant war with humans who were trapped with them. He had raised a human child and taught him mental techniques, but kept his face covered after being labeled a hideous mutation. Colitor uncovered a secret mental command that was implanted in Rembrandt to kill Quinn on command. After failing in the attempt to use it, he and his faction were sent away from the slide cage to random parts unknown. The next time he was encountered was on a world where California was still in the Old West. He led a gang of land rustlers under the alias of Mr. K in an effort to perpetuate a scheme to turn California into a gambling capital that would rival Las Vegas. When the Sliders came to that Earth, he panicked under the impression that they followed him there, and using a psychic Cro-Mag trick, he framed Quinn for murder. He was stopped after a showdown between himself and Colin, who was quicker with a gun than he was. He lives through the confrontation, but rode off away from town defeated. Notable guest stars: J. Acavone in Soul Survivors, Way Out West, and Eye of the Storm; Rabashaw Alexander in The Exodus, My Brother's Keeper, and a current affair, rent affair, rent affair, rent affair, rent affair, rent affair, rent affair. Karen Austin in Eggheads and Way Out West, out west. Lee Ayres, B. Abba Babatond, Adrian Barbeau, Marshall Bell, Julie Bentz as Jenny Michener in Electric Twister Acid Test, David Burney, Meredith Bishop as Jenny Anderson in The Dying Fields, Bill Bolander, Katie Boyer, Charlie Brill, Julie Caitlin Brown as Crawmag Officer in Requiem, Michelle Burke, C. E. Veronica Cartwright in The Fire Within, Gary Chalk, Tommy Chong as Van Elsinger in Stoker, Melinda Clark as Alessandra in This Slide of Paradise, Roger Cross, Robert Curtis Brown, Charles Cyphers, D. Anthony David in Stoker, Slide Cage, and A Current Affair, John DeMita, James Denton, Clinton Derricks Carroll as the double of Rembrandt Brown in The King is Back, Great Fellas, and The Prince of Slides, Michael Dobson, Roy Dotrice as Chandler in Data World and Mark in The Seer, Jerry Doyle, Rodney Eastman, Robert Englund, Sybil Ergener, F. Corey Feldman as Reed Michener in Electric Twister Acid Test, Neil Flynn, Sean Flynn Amier, Constance Forslund, Meg Foster as Margaret Burke in Slide by Wire, Stuart Fratkin, Dan Gauthier, Rebecca Gay Hart as Natalie Nassau in Time Again and World, George Gaines, Burton Gilliam, Janso Gordon, Gruvio off-screen character, only mentioned, a Mexican magician. They had to cross an invisible bridge to get to his house. Francis Ginnan, Jerry Hardin, Isaac Hayes as the Prime Oracle in Obsession, Rachel Hayward, Sandra Hess as Marta in Genesis, Jennifer Hetrick in Last Days and The Seer, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, Sherman Howard, J.A., Robert Jane, Don Jeffcoat, Ken Jenkins in Revelations and Dust, Ben Jones, K. John Cassier, Apollonia Cotero, L. Rob Labelle, Deborah Lacey, Lisa Lackey, Clayton Landy, Brooke Langton, Frederick Lane, Don Louis in The Breeder, Barry Livingston, Christana Loken, Brad Laurie, Laurie M. Stephen Matched in Common Ground and New Gods for Old, Chase Masterson as Kelly Wells in Seasons Greetings, Fanny Masterson as Renfield in Stoker, Chuck McCann, Kathleen McClellan as Erica Slash, Shauna Oldone in State of the ART, Paul McGillian, Zoe McLellan as Logan St Clair in Double Cross, Michael McMillian, Brian McNamara, Jim Metzler, Gabriel Miller, Dina Milligan, Eddie Mills as Derek in State of the ART, Judson Mills, Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Sid in El Cid, Don Most as Skip Collins in Dead Man Sliding, Lachlan Munro as Billy the Kid Gates in The Good, the Bad, and the Wealthy. N. Stephanie Nisnik, Ray Norman, Walter Alcuix as the Boss in World Killer, P. Barry Pepper, Gina Phillips, Eric Pierpoint, Gerard Plunkett as Father Jerry and Julian of the Spirits and Prince of Wales, David Purdam, Hugh Anthony Tyler Quinn in The Fire Within. R. Perry Reeves. J. August Richards as Damon in Just Say Yes. Robin Riker. Marco Rodriguez. S. Harry Shearer. Lise Sheridan. Skip Stelrecht. Ken Stedman. T. Marshall R. Teague and the Dying Fields, Way Out West, and Heavy Metal. Tim Tomerson. Mel Torm as himself in Great Fellas. Sean Taub. Paula Trickey. Connor Trinier as Simon in Profits and Loss. V. E. Philip Van Dyke. Randy Vasquez. W. Gwyneth Walsh. Joseph Wapner. Zach Ward in The Dream Masters. Malcolm Jamal Warner as R.J. in My Brother's Keeper. Michael Warren. Ed Wasser. Shane West. Karen Witter. Nicholas Worth. Lisworth. Adam Wiley. Y. Michael York as Dr. Vargas in This Slide of Paradise. Carl Gabriel York in Common Ground, California Reich, and The Return of Maggie Beckett. Rob Youngblood in Paradise Lost and The Great Work. References